Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this lecture on antebellum reforms. Remember, the antebellum period is the period between the War of 1812 and the Civil War. And during this time, we are going to get many changes in society in America. These reforms are going to come out of the Second Great Awakening. It's the idea that you as a person have the ability to take actions and improve not only yourself, but society. Now, Charles Finney is kind of the leading figure in this. He coined the phrase the burned over district, which was in New York. They had a bunch of these camp meetings, and from this we get progress. It is also important to note that during this time, women are going to take a prominent role in these reforms, as it gave women the Second Great Awakening gave women equality in the religion, and thus they felt they should have equality in society as well. Now, I must again just hit on the point that it is during this time, during the Second Great Awakening, that we get the Mormons, founded by Joseph Smith. They are going to run into serious opposition. They are going to continually move. They're going to be kind of located in Ohio, Illinois at first, but Smith and his brother are murdered by a mob, and so Brigham Young will take this band of Mormons, the Church of Saints, to Utah in 1846, 1847. And it is there that they are going to kind of create this area for the Mormons. As we know, a majority of it is in Utah, but you can see their travels as they continue through. Now, based on the Second Great Awakening, Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote some famous books about American democracy, had this point to be made about religion, and thus why the Second Great Awakening is so important, that no country in the world where the Christian religion retains a greater influence over the souls of men in America. Okay, and so understand this will have a direct impact on these antebellum reforms. Not necessarily a reform, but more of a movement. The idea of Transcendentalism, but basically that you as an individual have the ability to come up with truth from within. They believed in nature, promoted this idea of self-reliance or independence. It will be seen majority in literature with Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, who also believed in civil disobedience, which will be used later on by some in our civil rights movement. Okay, and so this idea is that you have self-improvement, you have the ability for self-reliance. It is all based on self. Now, interesting enough, these two individuals will have such a huge impact on literature, as many of you will find out through your English classes. And then the reaction to this opposition was actually a gentleman named Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote Scarlet Letter. Out of the idea of having self-promotion or being able to become better through action, we get the idea of some utopian communities during this time, trying to make the perfect society. We get a few examples, Brook Farm, everyone sharing in on living, labor, and leisure. We get UNITO, or the Anita Utopian Community. They rejected traditional marriage. They believed in eugenics, basically trying to create the best children possible using genetics, or using those who are better, they thought, while sharing property and families. There wasn't the traditional idea of a family. We also get the Shakers, who didn't believe in children, and so there's many groups that will come about because of this. Also, out of the Second Great Awakening, because women take a bigger role, there's going to be this move for temperance or against alcohol. We get the American Temperance Society, started by Lyman Beecher, and for numerous reasons. Average male drank 3 times what they do today. They felt that this was hurting not only the workforce, but society. And so you'll get this movement that starts now. When we get to the progressives, it will take off even more, and this is when we'll get the ban of alcohol in the 1920s, prohibition. You get the bucket brigade, the cold water bucket brigades of children, because they have to throw cold water on their passed out dads in the morning. And so many women felt this was tearing the fabric of American society. And so we were going to fight this, and this is one of those things we are fighting for at this time. Dorothy Dix at this time is going to lead the charge for prison reform. this time, those mentally ill were just sent to prisons, and so she really starts setting up this idea of mental hospitals for those not prisons, and then also the idea that prisons aren't just to lock up bad people, that prisons should be used to rehabilitate people and bring them back into society. So Dorothea Dix has a huge role in that. There's also the huge push with education, as we saw in the Second Great Awakening. Very few children past 10 attended school. There was no uniform education policy in the United States. So, for instance, the area of New England had a way better education system than the South, based on the idea that education allows you to bring the gap between the rich and the poor down. The gentleman who's really going to fight for this is Horace Mann. He's going to push for the idea of public education, taxes paying for curriculum, and teachers and schools actually being public. By 1860, every state offered this. So this is going to be a huge push, and one of the big reasons this is a huge push is because of white male suffrage. And so if people are going to be citizens of this country and do their civic duties, they should be educated. And so this is why we get that push, but really it's going to focus on white males at the time. It's slowly going to transform into what it is today. There, with the push of Second Great Awakening and the idea of equality in religion for women, you're also going to get this idea of equality for women in society. This is going to go through the progressive era and into the 1920s until we get women's suffrage. At this time, during the Antebellum time, it is a reaction to the idea of the cult of domesticity in the North specifically, and the cult of honor in the South. But basically what those both said was the role of women was limited to the home and family. Okay, and their legal status was that of a minor, a white male minor. Okay, not a whole lot of rights. And so you're going to get this push. One of the big things and the key things to know was this Seneca Falls Convention. The leaders, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, wrote the Declaration of Sentiments, which reads much like the Declaration of Independence, at some parts word for word. And you're also at this time going to get those who fought, and many women both not only fought for women's right, but abolition. One of those blacks was Sojourner Truth, who did it. And so she was black, she was a woman, and so she was fighting for both at this time. Now, a statement from the Declaration of Sentiments was this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. And we skip down. The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man towards women, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable right to the elective franchise. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she had no voice. He has withheld from her rights which are given to the most ignorant and degraded men, both natives and foreigners. Okay, and then the list goes on. So this reads like the Declaration of Independence, basically saying we should have the same rights men do. Now we get to the major movement of the time, basically because of the Civil War coming up in the 1860s, and that is of abolition. There are some key groups that come about. The first is the American Colonization Society. This was for individuals who might feel that slavery is wrong, but did not feel that blacks were equal. One member of this we'll know is Abraham Lincoln. This was free blacks, send them to Libya in Africa, and create a colony there for them. Okay, this takes off. There are some ships that are sent there, but it never really fully gets going. We have some important individuals that come up this time, and we'll talk about this more in Unit 5 as well. William Lloyd Garrison, who will start out more moderate, but as the years go, will become more radical with this idea of emancipation, which he believed immediate emancipation. He wrote The Liberator, and he also helped form the American Anti-Slavery Society. You also have numerous free blacks that are going to push, and this is where we'll get two different views from blacks on not only anti or against slavery, but once slavery is over, for equal rights seen in the civil rights movement. Okay, and we'll get kind of like contrasting figures. One, David Walker, fight for freedom. He's radical. He promotes violence. He is okay with that. On the other, at this time, you get Frederick Douglass, who believed that to gain abolition through political process was the right way to do this. He wrote the No Star. He was a slave. He became educated, and he continued with that. And we already mentioned Sojourner Truth. Okay, I hope this helps get you ready for the quiz tomorrow and Friday, and as we dive into these individuals and reforms more in class. Adios.